Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Ninja Bunny Crafting. So in today's build, we are going to do a chapel, which this entire build originally was supposed to be a complementary piece to this cemetery right here that I did. Last build, honestly, I ever did before starting this channel. And today's build is going to be this amazing guy, like I said, this chapel right here. And it's a pretty fun one, as far as I'm concerned. But the issue with the build, for me, is that my ADHD took hold. See, this build was not supposed to be this detailed. Or this vast. It was just supposed to be a quick little chapel build on a spare piece of XPS foam that I had to use as its base. Well, let's get to me showing you the build, and I'll explain to you what was going on as I built it. That way you can, maybe if you don't have ADHD, you can kind of understand some of your friends. If you do have ADHD like me, and it's as severe as mine, maybe this can help you out a little bit. Getting over it, because let's be fair, a lot of our friends and a lot of people that don't have ADHD probably don't understand how hard it is to have a hobby and ADHD. Like all my builds, this one started very simply with a sketch on a piece of paper and a few words on what I wanted to see or accomplish, which was an old church with a graveyard. Once that was done, I simply went and started cutting ready core foam out that I wanted. Some of these pieces are cut for floor and sidewalks to the graveyard. Other ones I went out of the way and cut to be part of the building. And to save myself time, I ordered 3D rollers to give me some texture and some shapes. And I was really excited to use them. And for the beginning of this, most of the beginning of this build went according to the plan I'd laid out and what I wanted to see so I could get this done in a timely manner. And what I mean by that is that, believe it or not, most of the time in between me doing my videos is more recording than actually building the project. Recording a project can take up a lot of time, surprisingly, and can be a real dopamine kill, which kind of is a bad thing if you have ADHD, because we tend to follow the dopamine. Now here on this XPS foam, as you can see, I actually roughly drew out. These aren't supposed to be perfect shapes on this XPS foam, but they're supposed to give me a rough idea on where I wanted things placed, which was great. Allowed me to get right to it. When I needed a step for the front there to go with the little floor plan for the chapel, I was ready, set to go. Even using a texture roller over it, because hey, I wanted to keep some kind of cool, consistent look going. And like I said, everything at this point is going according to plan. The editing, the video, shooting, everything is working according to plan. Even the pretty cut bricks I had made weeks prior in advance, I had just enough counted out to get this done. I was very excited that this particular project wasn't only going to look good on the table for me, but it was going to look good on camera, and I was going to have it out in a relatively fast pace for this particular type of thing. That, of course, it didn't end up being the case. Otherwise, this video would not be using this script where I'm talking about my neurodivergence causing an issue making the video. At this point in the build, I am particularly happy with the way it's going and begin to do the Mod Podging. Now, this is probably the very first moment where my neurodivergence, my ADHD, kicks in and diverts from my plan. My original plan was not to do any painting, sealing, Mod Podging, priming, anything until I had everything built and finished, so to speak. I wanted to have the chapel built and ready to go so that I could do this Mod Podging and the chapel's Mod Podging at the same time. In fact, I hadn't even put on the retaining wall that's supposed to be along the outside of the XPS foam ground base here. Had I stopped and noticed that I was getting ahead of myself, I would have kept moving with my plan, which was to complete the entire base for the chapel to sit on. I didn't do that though. I Mod Podged it and jumped right into texturing the wall pieces I had cut out for the chapel. Now, I did the texturing first before doing the rollers on all the things I was going to use the rollers with, because the rollers only imprint the brick shape. They wouldn't give the brick texture that a piece of styrofoam can take from a tinfoil ball. And again, I was moving so fast and on such a dopamine high, you can even see where I'd set up all my marks and textured the wrong side of one of my walls there, the piece of wall that had Sharpie pen line right down the center. And if you know what Sharpie pen does to foam, like gritty core foam or XPS foam, it actually has a chemical in it that eats a little bit away and leaves a line in it. But like I said, I was so set. Here's another point where my ADHD kicked in. I had planned no side windows for this chapel. It was just supposed to have one circular window up at the front of the building right above the door. But I began to think, oh, chapels have side windows. Let's do that. Let's make side windows right here on this. Again, I was so far into my dopamine, I did not stop and go, wait, this wasn't part of our original plan. We should stop, recalibrate, rethink, redo this. We don't want this to take a month to shoot because we went off script so far that we don't know what we're gonna do. That I did not do, and I really wish I had. I think the video would have turned out 1,000 times more informative and better had I, because once I get past texturing this building, I completely divert from all of my plans, all of my layouts, and begin creating, well, the chapel you saw at the beginning of the video, which was not what I had drawn or written down in my original plans. So, as I did this video, as I started editing everything, putting it all together, and realizing how far I got out, I decided that this was the perfect time to talk about why ADHD in a hobby can be an issue. Because you are seeing right now what happens when you just get an idea and it makes you feel good and you run with it without adjusting that idea to your initial plans. Now, I really wish, really wish I had taken a moment to think everything through before recording when I started to change the plans. As you can see, I'm adding the Mod Podge here to the sides, and I'm going to add Mod Podge to the front. I'm pre-Mod Podging the walls, which I shouldn't have done. Something inside of me decided to start pre-Mod Podging this, and that I would turn this into like in a factory assembly line kind of build. I was just going to get all the pieces pre-primed, pre-painted, and then just stick it all together and be done with it even faster. And while that could work with a lot of different builds, it did not help me on this build. In fact, it led to several more problems as I started to think of, oh, let's add this or that as I went. My original plan here was being stuck to, though for some reason I failed to record that. Don't know why. Just failed to. Didn't even realize I didn't record cutting out that window. And here's another example of, like I said, this factory line. Since I was on this factory line kick, I decided I would go through, I would dry brush and set up the entire base and begin painting the floor in extremely watered down red and blue colors, just picking out some areas to kind of make it look like faded colored stone or marble. This was far too early in the build to be doing this, but because I was riding my dopamine high and not stopping to take a moment and go, hey, why am I doing this now? This should be done at the end of the build when I can control paint a little bit better, when it's a little bit easier to do. You're not worrying about adding colors or flockings or anything like that. But I didn't think about that. I got so into it that I even added a wash into this, which I'm not saying that any of this turned out bad. It all turned out great. But the problem is, like I've been trying to reiterate here, is that I was recording all of this. I'm trying to inspire, I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to show some things. I'm trying to do for others what was done for me. And by what I mean was done for me was, when the pandemic broke out and we were all sitting at home, I'm a 20 plus year DM. I have been running games since I was 16 and I'm 41 now. I didn't do miniatures. I didn't do 3D terrain. I would sometimes draw out a map and throw pennies or whatever I could find for tokens out there if somebody needed visual representation. But during the pandemic, I sat down and I saw a video by Black Magic Craft. And that was just him using dollar store stuff to build this Tudor-style home. And since I was bored, and you could go into the dollar store at that time, masked up obviously, I figured, what the hell, I'll try building terrain. I ended up loving it. It was so much fun and allowed me to express my creativity for the hobby in a way I had never done before. And as I went through the years and got better and better at this, and my style started to reform into this kind of comic book, like somebody took one of my drawings and put it there in 3D form, my wife and friends encouraged me to do this YouTube channel. They suggested that I did really good builds that were fun, and I should show others how to do that. And I guess this video is a little bit of a divergence from that, as it is a crafting build. You can see me doing it, and I am still explaining some of what's going on here as I do it. But this time I figured I would talk about the issue I'm having doing the videos. Here I'm adding an ink wash to the outside walls. The ink wash actually came out really well. I didn't need to dab off any excess ink. Well, too much. Only that one piece that really had too much of an ink wash for me that was looking a little too shiny needed to be dabbed off. Here I'm adding a little bit of bronze to some toothpicks I'd cut to look like an X for the above window I was going to do. And again, here's another point where we come to my ADHD and me not stopping to think, because had I stopped and thought, I would have put something a little bit better underneath here for the UV resin to pool in, and I would have pre-colored that resin before adding it instead of trying to color it once it was in. So as I was saying about my friends and family pushing me into this hobby, well, I should say recording my hobby to be more precise. When I started this, I was gung-ho. I thought it was going to be real easy. It's just me setting up my phone or a camera and recording what I do. That was not the case. It was actually much more work than I realized. And because of the amount of work, I was afraid that I would lose any kind of interest. That I was immediately going to just, oh, well, this isn't for me, I'm done. Luckily, that isn't what happened to me. However, I am still battling with some of the issues of ADHD while doing this. One of the things for me is perfectionism. I so desperately need something to look perfect because of my ADHD that if I didn't have someone to come in and say, oh wow, that looks good, or hey wow, that looks great, what are you doing next? Somebody like my wife to step in and say something to me, you would never see anything and I would never build anything because I would think it always looked like trash. And therein comes part of the problem with videos, is as you make these videos, the algorithm, everyone hates it and they think it's their enemy, but it's nothing. Quite literally, it's not your enemy, it's not your friend, it's just trying to find your audience for you. That's why they always say you need to do a bunch of videos, because it's trying to learn you and it's trying to learn your audience. But with rejection syndrome, it's rejection dysphoria syndrome that people with ADHD have. It's hard to give the algorithm time to do its job because in my case right now, we've got about 60 subscribers. All 60 of you are amazing and I love you. Thank you for being my subscribers, by the way. But with 60 subscribers, I get about 60 views. Each one of you seem to watch the video, which makes me amazingly happy. However, my ADHD then thinks that I'm a complete failure because I'm not sitting at 20k videos like some of these other crafters. That makes an issue because I'm feeling, my brain is thinking I am being rejected by the YouTube community, and that's just not the case. So I have to fight to push myself to make the next video because of those feelings. Some of you might think that doesn't make any sense, but it's very easy to explain for somebody with ADHD. If it feels like you're mad at us, we immediately assume that you don't like us or that we have done something wrong to you. You might not even be mad at us. You might be really in a great mood and we might go, hey, how you doing? And you didn't even hear us. A lot of us will assume that you just don't want us around, that we have upset you, we have done something wrong. This is rejection syndrome for us. We take rejection harsh and bad. As a kid growing up, I got lucky and unlucky at the same time. My mom was a kind, caring, listening woman who was the disciplinarian of the family. And my dad was that big, burly biker dude. My mom always cared how I felt, and so did my dad, but my dad was the one that told me I shouldn't care what others think. And I told him about what it felt like to be rejected for me. And he gave me a great piece of advice that has helped me out. It doesn't stop the feelings, but my dad made a point to me. He goes, the people that like you, the people that love you, the people that think you're important will always come back to you, even if you think they've rejected you. And he was right. Many times I thought my friends hated my guts and that this was the end of the line for me. I was going to just get kicked out of a friend group or something, and the next day they all show up like I had done nothing wrong or nobody was mad at me at all. And that applies very much to YouTube videos, that feeling that when you're not getting 30, 40, 50 views within the first hour, you feel rejected. And that's just simply not the case. I mean, at this point, if you're watching the video this far, I know you're not rejecting this build. You're loving seeing me right now putting this building together, this chapel walls together, and fitting inside of this little thing so that I can take the building on and off in future games. I know that you're enjoying this content, and I'm hoping I am entertaining you or being informative or providing you some kind of value in this video. Now, at this point, if you're wondering what's going on in the build, I'm adding some XPS styrofoam little blocks I built to help just kind of sturdy up the edges a little bit and give this a little bit more of a footprint to stand on when I slide it into the kind of floored recess area I made on the XPS game board, ground board kind of thing for the chapel here. Don't mind me stuttering on what to call the words. Everyone has a different word they like to use, so I just try to throw as many of them in there to kind of hit what you call it or what you think it should be called. And as you can see, I continually check, double check, triple check here as I'm putting things in, because I want this to fit in nice and snug, because I'm going to pop it on and off a ton of different games, where I'm going to use it as an abandoned chapel or church, or I'm going to use it as a rundown one that's just, in a poor village or something like that. And it's the reason I went with this particular style and shape for this chapel, was that it gave me a duality use to it. I can use it as the abandoned one, I can use it as a rundown one, I can use it as an old one. The only thing I can't use this for is a brand new church, because it looks too weathered, and that's what I wanted. New churches, nobody ever feels creeped out in a new church, but an old one, they feel creeped out with. So, going to the ADHD problem here. Originally, that was supposed to be the end of the chapel. I was going to paint the sides gray, give them a little bit of texturing on the little edges that would appear right there, and the chapel was going to be done. I didn't like that. I decided I would take some of my XPS bricks and cut them in half to build this kind of brick corner along the sides to hide the seams. And what I did here was I took the little thin piece after I cut them in little half pieces, and I made these little glued ones right here, just a series of them, so that I could stack them on top of each other with the seam alternating to make it look more like bricks being stacked up. It really turned out well, I think. But had I taken a moment and thought about this again, had I stopped the moment I went off plan and started thinking about all the weird things and let my brain run, I could have set up a plan, and this would have gone so much smoother in the recording. I don't really care if I go off course when I'm doing the build if I'm not recording it, because to me that is part of the adventure and fun of doing a build like this. If you're watching me and you're getting inspired and you're not recording this stuff, I encourage going off script occasionally. If something pops in your mind and it looks good, go off script and do it. If you have ADHD, going off script can be an issue, because you could lose that dopamine high and abandon the project. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for people with ADHD versus non-neurodivergent people when it comes to going off script. In this case, I really do, and I just don't think I'll ever not get a dopamine high off of crafting something. And since I'd already done all that painting, I had to paint up these corners ahead of time. So like before, I picked out a few areas, took some brown, and just painted up a few of the areas, because when you put the dry brush of what I use is it's called fog gray, it's a very light gray. Once you put that over that, it's going to lighten up those brown bricks to a point, but it's going to give some color differentiation. It's going to give you a few bricks that kind of pop out, even if they're kind of blended in by the dry brushing, or even just a really wet coat of translucent paint. Now, to seal these to the edges, I didn't want to use tacky glue or anything. I wanted it instant sealed and really good, so I just added a generous amount of hot glue. And then just while it was in the thing, so I had my areas lined up, those corner parts lined up so that they would set perfectly when you put it in. I put it in the hole and hot glued it then. Now, if you've ever been by an old church, ever at all, and where I live, I've seen a few of them in this kind of style. They have sandstone or this yellowish brick that kind of works like a windowsill outside of the window. So I started cutting just, again, those XPF bricks that I have, I just started cutting them really thin and tiny, and I started putting them around the edge of the window. This was one of those moments where my ADHD, and again, most of my ADHD here, in my opinion, ended up making the build so much better, but it really delayed the process. Here's another example. I should have had the entire brick outside parts for all these windows pre-Mod Podged, pre-painted, pre-washed, since I was going with this factory style assembly and I was already too far into the build to do it properly. But I didn't do that either. Stuck them on immediately because I wanted to go, and then I put in tacky glue over a lot of the windows, and then just added Mod Podge and started dry brushing. It ended up looking really good, and I was very proud with it. I was very, very proud with it. However, like I said, this made it harder on me. This was unnecessary extra work that I could have avoided by just stopping when I started to go off kilter and thinking about what I was doing and just restructuring my entire shoot. Because the entire issue here for me wasn't that I went off script, wasn't that I started adding extra things in after I'd started building. It was that I did this while recording, that I have a plan in mind for my recordings because I want the recording and editing to go smooth. I do not get a giant dopamine fix off of editing, believe it or not. I do not have much fun sitting here having to speed up things, slow down things, which angle looked good, which angle didn't. Those things annoy me. So as I said before, I cut all the pieces for this building ahead of time when it came to the walls. And this piece right here is the roof. And at about every 1/4 inch, I put a dot on both sides, and as you can see, I'm connecting them because I'm making wood boards that are going to go, well, they're wood boards. It's going to be the part of the roof. And my initial plan here was after getting this set and textured, I was going to cut shingles from cardboard boxes, cereal boxes. You just cut them out, do a little 3-tab kind of look, add them, and maybe have a couple pieces missing so a board or two is shown. I didn't do that. I cut pieces of XPS foam into long strips here because a part of me wanted slate roofing. And when I did that, I took sandpaper and beveled the edges of these strips to kind of give them that rounded look like a piece of slate has. And in this excitement is where another problem of ADHD came in. The entire recording I did of me making the roof with these slate shingles was pointed in the wrong direction. I was off cue that entire shoot. Now, here I have this built, and I'm adding shingles to the side to kind of hide part of the roofing. I want to explain what happened here because I failed to record it for you guys. So adding each of those shingles individually, I had left out little itty bitty pieces of the roof, like I said, to have some exposed. And once it was sitting there drying, I took a Sharpie, a very fine tip Sharpie marker, and drew 3 lines down each one of those shingles because for some reason, when I think of slate shingles, my brain sees 3 or 4 grooved lines running down them that was probably caused by years of water or rain or even just designed like that. And once this was all set and I had all that done, as you can see, I started Mod Podging it. And I'm avoiding the down there where the wood would be exposed because I had pre-painted it brown. Again, I should not have pre-painted it brown. I was so far ahead of myself that I didn't think about all my processes. I should have waited so that I could do all this Mod Podging all at once. Did this cause me an issue in the long run? No. I just had to avoid where I went so that I didn't get too many mixing colors. And then after I did it, right here I'm adding beach glass is what it's called. Because when you add a brown and black combo wash like I do, which is a oil wash mix of 2 parts sepia to 1 part black. Once you add that, it's going to change this beach glass into a slate color, and it's going to highlight all of those little lines that I put into it. But when I'd finished, I took a moment and took some whitened brown to highlight the wood and make it look more eye-grabbing. And as you can see here, I'm applying that generous wash right now all over those shingles. And when it's all said and done, I throw on a dry brush because that's going to give it a more highlighted ridge on the shingles, more eye pop, and it's going to draw your eye to all the right spots of the roof when you're looking at it. Here, as I'm working, I'm getting ready to attach the roof. And I thought about using hot glue, which probably would have went quicker, but I decided I would use tacky glue because I really do enjoy the tacky glue. Will dry completely clear, and it gives me some working time with the roof because I want a little bit of overhang on the front and the sides. And as you see me apply and attach it here, I'm getting a little bit antsy at this point in the build. I'm getting antsy because I can't wait to start adding flocking, ground baster, add the gravestones, add the trees I've ordered in from Temu and things like that. That's right, you can find some like really cool things for crafting hobbies, like little scatter terrain trees and whatnot. If you don't feel like building them yourselves, you can get those from Temu, believe it or not. Pretty cheap. Once I had the roof aligned, I was really happy, but I scrapped my original cap plan for it and decided I would cut a piece of cereal box into a strip, paint it gold, and then once the gold paint had dried, I steepled on what's known as pastel seafoam speed paint from Army Painter, because the way it dried, the speed paint dried, looked more like the oxidization process for copper and tin, and I really liked that. I'm like, ooh, that looks so crisp on there. So earlier in the video, if you remember me mentioning when I Mod Podged this, I shouldn't have Mod Podged it when I did, and this is why, because I had planned to build a retainer wall. If you've seen the cemetery short where I have the little voiceover talking about the spooky cemetery, which this piece is accompanying, you'll notice that I did the brick retainer wall as one solid piece. I cut it in a solid piece, added the texturing and everything I needed to, and then just glued it right onto the cemetery. This time, I decided I would do each and every brick individually along the side because I really just liked the way the individual brick placing looks. And I started at the corners. The reason I started at the corners is because it's a little bit easier to start at a corner and work your way around. Once I had everything set up, once I was all ready to go, I went back through and I put black Mod Podge around this entire retainer wall. I'm glad I hadn't added anything else at this point because honestly I would have got black Mod Podge all over, flocking or dirt or something, and it would have made this so hard. So for once I was glad my brain didn't tell me to do steps ahead that I shouldn't have. And honestly, once I applied the light gray fog, I really was proud of how it looked, and I was very, very glad that I went with the individual bricks, the way they go off kilter from each other, the way some pop out a little bit more than others, the way some kind of like lean to a little side. It gave it all this weathered and amazing look. So as I went forward, I had originally intended only to have tombstones. However, the tombstones I had ordered from Ender's Toys come with these nifty little grave statues. So I decided I would put them at the front entrance to the church and paint them gold. That was, in my opinion, one of those moments where you've gone off script and it doesn't even feel like you've gone off script. Putting in the gold paint here on this, and that's what I used was gold mini paint, not gold craft paint for these guys because it has a higher pigment count, and I really wanted that shine to come through. And I just apply this actually very watered down so that the zenithal highlight that I put on these guys can do its work much better. As you can see, it does take me a moment because it's so watered down that I have to wait for a little bit to dry before adding a little bit more. But once it was dried, I just simply added on a wash of brown and black to help make it look dirty and bring out some of those low points. Once the wash had dried, I just hit it again with a quick dry brushing. Not much of a dry brushing, a very light dry brushing, to just kind of, again, help make it look weathered, aged, or patined as it is. And I was very happy with this. So as I said, I wanted gravestones, and I had these from Ender's Toys, and I went outside and primed them up with the intent of showing you guys how I painted these. However, I did not. I was on such a fix that I skipped that entire process and forgot to record. As you can see now, I'm adding the statues in ahead of time, and I'm going to add in some of my trees and a few other things before putting on the ground dirt, which, if you watched our last video, is just simply dried, used coffee grounds. Why do we go used? Because it takes on a different color, and when you dry them in the oven, they become more like a dust or a dirt than they do grounds. As you can see here, I'm adding the tombstones. You remember earlier when I was doing this, I had marked out little lines. Those little lines were the tombstone. And surprisingly, even after you put your Mod Podge mixture onto the ground, you can see the grooved indents because I used a Sharpie marker, which made it easy for me to follow my build plan. Well, what was left of the original build plan. Here, I poked a hole using the tree I intended to go in there onto the styrofoam, and then squirted in some glue before reinserting the tree into that hole so that the glue and it can dry and get a nice look here. And once that's all said and done, once you've got a few of these little trees and other large accoutrements that pop out, put down an extremely watered down PVA glue, which is what I'm doing here. And I'm just brushing it all over the place because I need as much of the ground covered dirt here that I'm going to use for my used coffee grounds to cover this as much as possible. I've spent a lot of time thinking about when I do this particular step, if there's some way to make it more efficient, and I really cannot think of a way to make it more efficient than just basically brushing on watered down PVA glue in sections before adding this. I could have done it everywhere and then just generously and liberally sprinkled this base cover everywhere, but I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. So I did it in sections. And honestly, if you're ever worried about that, that's what I would recommend. Do a section at a time and then add in the dirt. I did have one issue after I did all this. I should have made the glue a little less watery for the ground cover, because I did have to go back over once it had all stuck and reapply a top coat of watered down PVA glue before going here to do the PVA glue coat that would be used for flocking. A lot of PVA glue watered down right here right now. Once that occurred, I used a combination of yellowed grass and bright green grass. Normally I would try to keep it on the yellow or dead side, but I needed there to appear to be some level of life since there are trees and some other flowers and things I was going to add in here after all the flocking had dried. So I wanted to go with the best, what I thought was the best possible combo. Now if you look here, I do leave some spots where I didn't add PVA glue, and you can see the coffee ground dirt coming through. So I want you to see that. You would probably see that along retainer walls at a church like this anyway. And if you'll look, as I start to add more and more pieces of these scatter train flockings and things that I had gotten from my wife, I believe these are from Greenworks. They have shrub grass, and it's going to add some flowers and whatnot. You'll see that I added dirt along the sidewalks even. That was done with a toothpick and watered down PVA glue, heavily watered down, and then given hours to dry before I brushed it off, or used, well, in this case I used canned air to just blow it away. And here we are at the final touches of this build, guys. And none of this stuff was originally intended. To be fair, it was just supposed to be some dried leaves, that I was going to put down along the tombstones and a couple of trees and then the grass flocking. But I just kept adding. I wanted the scene to feel alive. And I thought I captured that as I went. I guess, honestly, had my ADHD not kicked in, this build had probably gone quicker, but I don't think it would have been as fun and enjoyable. I don't think it would look as good as it does here. At this point, no one knew when the church had been built. No one could recall why it was built or to what gods it was built for. Everyone in town had swore that this building had probably been here before the town itself. And it had been used for who knows how many years. But everyone in the town swears that when the dead began to rise in the cemetery nearby, that the church soon fell. But every day and night a ghostly light stays lit. Creaking of bones patrol its cemetery yards, and a deathly scream at night can be heard from some ungodly wraith or banshee. Only you, party, can hope to figure out what is going on. So guys, there you have it. With all of it out there, and the build finished, which again, I'm very proud of the build. Cannot tell you enough. A lot of these trees and shrubs my wife bought for me from Temu, and I forgot to mention any of that, which made me sad. As you can see, you can literally just pop this guy on, pop him off. Need to play the interior? There we go. But the ADHD made this go from a simple build to this. And while I was proud of this build, again, very proud, very happy with the way it turned out, the way it looked, I was less than happy with how I recorded it and presented it to you guys. With all that being said, I want to thank you for sticking around to this part of the video. Honestly, this is the most help you can give me with this channel. It's surprising, just sticking around here to the end. I know a lot of people are like, please like, share, subscribe, join my Patreon. I have all that I like to say to you guys. You know, I'm Ninja Bunny Crafting over on Patreon. Liking, sharing, subscribing, all that helps. But what helps the most is watching this the whole way through. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Get out there and get crafting.